Patricia, stand up. This might take a while. Just to let you young people know, I've been in love with the same woman for 48 years. If my wife ever finds out who it is, she'll kill both of them. Today I'm going to be talking about my book, The Color of Love. This February is Black History Month, and we have elected our first African American. It is altogether appropriate and timely to talk about The Color of Love. Before we begin to discuss the book, we have to put it in historical Nashville, Kentucky, in March 3rd, 1940. It is inconceivable for any of you to understand or to envision the environment of black men, women, and children at that time. Our schools were segregated. Blacks had to use separate restrooms, separate fountains, and to play sports with a white was practically unheard of. In fact, the only two times I ever played baseball with a black boy almost caused a riot on both occasions. One time in particular sticks in my mind. I was playing second base, and a black boy named Doodlebug was playing third. A blonde-haired boy was playing left field and began attacking Doodlebug with racial remarks. Finally, Doodlebug smacked him. You got it. Get it. The boy grabbed his face and yelled out, "I'm going to tell my grandfather what you did." And the boy ran down the right field line and down the ballpark. Doodlebug and I and the other kids went back to what was really important, was playing baseball. An inning or two later, I glanced over at Doodlebug, and he was frozen stiff in fear. I turned around and looked down the right field line, and here grandfather had a cat o' nine-tailed whip in one hand and a horse pistol that was probably from the Civil War in the other. I went out to right field, got between Doodlebug and his grandson. I got between the old man and his grandson and Doodlebug. The old man asked, "Where's that black blankety blank who hit my grandson?" And I explained to the old man what had happened. He said, "Are you going to let me hit? Are you going to let me whip that boy or not?" I responded, if white is right and black is wrong, it is your grandson who is black today. That old man stared at me for what seemed to be an eternity. And then he grabbed his grandson's hand, spun him around, and pushed him out toward right field. I turned back to look at Doodlebug. About that time, I heard a crack of that whip. And I swear to you, when I turned around, that grandson was still in midair holding his backside. A short time later, Doodlebug and I were walking through the park toward the baseball field again. We saw a white drunk man passed out on the ground, and a group of small white kids were giving him a hard time, making fun of him. And he jumped up and started chasing those white kids. Doodlebug and I got between him and the kids to let him away so the kids could get away. I was kind of proud of that, so I took Doodlebug home with me, and I told my mother that story. And she took me to one side and said, "Cliff, it's nice what you did, but don't bring a black child to the house." I want you to think about that. That is the environment that I was brought up in. I actually started my own road to my beliefs on race at the ripe old age of 10. I was walking down some steps from a local store called Robinette's when I saw a black youngster about 10 or 11, maybe 12. I made some kind of racist remark, and that boy chased me all the way home. When we got to my house, he slapped my face. When I was 14, the United States Supreme Court ruled that schools had to be desegregated. I was stunned. Why did you do that? He responded, because you hurt my feelings. I swear to you, until that moment, I did not realize black children had feelings. When I was 14, the United States Supreme Court ruled that schools had to be desegregated. I was more than a little bit confused by that ruling, and on the following Sunday, I asked my Sunday school teacher how the Supreme Court decision affected my church. He said, it has no effect whatsoever. I then asked him, are you trying to tell me heaven is segregated? He threw me out of church. When I was 17, my homeroom teacher, Mrs. Justice, who had been selected as Teacher of the Year in Ashland, Kentucky the year before, asked me to write something, anything. She thought I had writing talent, but could not get me to produce anything for her. At her request, I wrote an essay entitled The Equality of Man. Remember, I was 17. The final line for that essay went as follows. As a nation, we cannot shout freedom and equality to the world and whisper prejudice and bigotry at home, because long after those shouts are forgotten, those words will still be heard. In the 1960s, after the freedom rides and the marches, I could not understand why Martin Luther King Jr. and others were still protesting and being arrested. I thought they had achieved all their goals of civil rights. They had that they had initially wanted. After all, they could then ride the buses and eat at all the restaurants. That's what I thought was their goal. Then I read a letter from a Birmingham jail, which was written by Dr. King when he was incarcerated in Alabama. Dr. King had received a letter from